The Centauri were known across the galaxy as conquerors, feared for their power and their ruthless ways. They had destroyed countless civilizations, and there was no species they couldn't crush. So when they first heard of Earth, a small, seemingly insignificant planet on the edge of the galaxy, they didn't take it seriously. They laughed at the idea of humans being anything more than an easy target. Earth was weak, and that was all there was to it. Commander Vorth, the leader of the Centauri fleet, had seen it all. He had led his people to victory time and time again, bringing even the mightiest of species to their knees. But as his massive warships descended upon Earth, something felt different. He couldn't quite place it, but there was an unease in the air that he had never felt before. As the Centauri ships entered Earth's atmosphere, they found something they weren't expecting. Earth's cities were quiet, almost eerily so, and there were no signs of the chaos they had anticipated. The planet seemed peaceful, almost unprepared. But the truth was, humanity had been waiting for this moment. They had known for years that the Centauri would eventually come, and they had used that time wisely. The Centauri had underestimated the humans. They had no idea how advanced Earth had become. While the galaxy thought Earth was stuck in the past, the humans had been quietly working on technologies far beyond anything the Centauri had ever seen. Earth's military wasn't just capable, it was more powerful than the Centauri could ever imagine. At first, the Centauri made the mistake of assuming that Earth would fall quickly. They launched their initial attack, confident that they would wipe out the humans in a matter of days. But as the battle began, the Centauri started to realize something was wrong. Their weapons didn't have the same effect on Earth's defenses as they had on other planets. The human warships fought back fiercely, unlike anything the Centauri had ever encountered before. Commander Vorth was puzzled. He ordered his fleet to advance, but Earth's response was swift and deadly. Humans were using weapons that the Centauri had never seen before. And they were organized, more organized than any species the Centauri had ever fought. The humans knew exactly how to counter the Centauri's every move. As the Centauri pushed forward, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. Earth's underground military base, hidden for centuries, suddenly activated. Massive warships, larger than anything the Centauri had seen, emerged from the ground, their weapons aimed directly at the invaders. The Centauri had thought they could destroy Earth's military infrastructure with ease, but the humans had been preparing for this day in secret. The Centauri were now on the defensive. Commander Vorth watched in disbelief as Earth's forces pushed back with strength and precision. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting to show the galaxy that they were no longer weak. They were fighting to prove that Earth was not a planet to be underestimated. The battle raged on, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Centauri, though powerful, were not used to fighting against a species that had been preparing for this exact moment for centuries. They were being pushed to their limits, and it was clear they hadn't expected Earth to put up such a fierce resistance. Commander Vorth knew one thing for certain, Earth was not the weak, defenseless planet he had believed it to be. The humans had surprised them, and they were not about to give up without a fight. For the first time in his long career as a conqueror, Vorth felt a small flicker of doubt. Perhaps Earth wasn't so weak after all. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Centauri had made a deadly mistake in underestimating the humans. The Centauri fleet had already been thrown off balance. They had arrived expecting a quick victory, but Earth had forced them to rethink everything. Commander Vorth stood on the bridge of his command ship, staring at the chaotic battlefield outside. His fleet was battered, but not broken. However, his confidence had been shaken. There was something about Earth's response that didn't make sense. They weren't supposed to be this strong. Vorth's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp voice. His second-in-command, Zarek, stepped forward, his face tense. "Commander, we've intercepted a strange transmission from Earth. It's a warning." "A warning?" Vorth's eyes narrowed. "From who?" "From their military leaders," Zarek explained. "It's a message directed specifically at you." Vorth's interest peaked. He listened to the transmission, which crackled with static before a human voice cut through. "You think you can conquer us? You've only seen the tip of the iceberg. You've been playing with the wrong species. Prepare yourselves for what's coming next." The message ended abruptly, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Vorth looked around at his officers. None of them knew what to make of it. But one thing was clear: the humans were more prepared than they had let on. The Centauri had believed they had wiped out Earth's technological advantages. They had destroyed satellite networks, crippled communication systems, and decimated most of the human military forces they'd encountered. What they hadn't known was that humanity had been hiding their true strength beneath the surface for centuries. The humans had built the Titan ships in secret, massive warships that were buried deep underground, hidden from even the most advanced surveillance systems in the galaxy. They had been built during a time when humanity had faced other threats that had long been forgotten by most of the galaxy. But the humans hadn't forgotten. Vortha's worst fears were realized when, just hours after the transmission, the ground beneath Earth's surface began to tremble. A deafening roar echoed across the planet as the Titan ships began to rise from the Earth. Huge warships, each more powerful than anything the Centauri had ever encountered, emerged from hidden bunkers and caverns, their weapons glowing with an eerie light. At first, the Centauri thought it was a bluff. They had to be bluffing, right? These ships were buried for centuries, how could they be ready for battle now? But the humans weren't bluffing. As the Titan ships rose into the sky, they unleashed a terrifying barrage of firepower. Massive energy blasts tore through the air, striking down Centauri warships with deadly accuracy. The Centauri didn't even have time to react. Commander Vorth watched in horror as one of his most trusted commanders was obliterated by a direct hit from one of the Titan ships. The Centauri fleet was crumbling before his eyes. The humans had turned the tide of the battle in a matter of moments. Desperately, Vorth ordered his fleet to regroup. "Fall back," he shouted. "We can't fight them like this." But it was already too late. The Titan ships were unstoppable. Their weapons were designed not only to defend Earth but to destroy entire fleets. With each passing moment, the Centauri fleet was being shredded by the relentless assault. As the battle raged on, the Centauri realized that they had made a catastrophic mistake. They had underestimated Earth's capacity for war. The humans had kept their most powerful weapon hidden, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now that moment had arrived. Vorth clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had underestimated the humans. They were not the weak, defenseless species he had believed them to be. They had not only prepared for war, they had been planning this for generations. Earth's secret weapon had been buried for centuries, and now it was unleashed, more powerful than anything the galaxy had ever seen. In the depths of space, the Centauri fleet was faltering. Earth's defenses were proving too strong. Commander Vorth knew that if they didn't retreat now, they would be wiped out completely. The humans had shown them one undeniable truth: Earth was not to be underestimated. As the Titan ships continued their assault, Commander Vorth made a decision. "All ships, retreat to the outer rim. We can't win this battle. Not today." But as he gave the order to retreat, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The humans had just shown their strength, but what else were they hiding? What other secrets did Earth hold? Vorth knew that Earth would never be the same again. The galaxy would soon know that humanity was no longer a weak species. They had risen from the ashes, and they weren't going to fall so easily. The retreat order had come too late. Despite their superior numbers and firepower, the Centauri were now facing an enemy they couldn't understand. Earth's response, which had initially seemed like a fluke, was quickly proving to be anything but. The Titan ships were relentlessly pounding their fleet with weapons more advanced than anything they had ever seen. Commander Vorth stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring out into the chaos. The vast emptiness of space was filled with the wreckage of Centauri warships, floating debris from ships that had been torn apart in the relentless assault. Their once imposing fleet was now a shattered remnant, scattered across the stars. "Commander," Zarek said, his voice tense. "We're losing control. If we don't do something soon, we'll be completely wiped out." Vorth clenched his jaw. "I know. But what can we do against these monsters?" The Titan ships were an unanticipated nightmare. They were fast, precise, and completely ruthless in battle. They tore through the Centauri fleet with ease, their cannons firing bursts of energy that ripped through ship after ship. Even their most advanced defenses seemed useless against the sheer power of these human vessels. Earth's forces were not only well prepared, they were better equipped than the Centauri had imagined. "Commander," Zarek repeated, his tone more urgent. "We need to make a stand. We can't just run. We'll lose all credibility in the galaxy. We've been undefeated for centuries. We can't show weakness now." Vorth nodded slowly. He understood the weight of the decision. The Centauri had built their empire by conquering others, by showing their power. If they lost here, if Earth defeated them, it would shatter their reputation across the stars. The Centauri would no longer be seen as invincible. Their dominance would be over. But what could they do? The Titan ships were nearly invulnerable, and the humans seemed to know exactly how to counter every strategy the Centauri had ever employed. Vorth knew that the key to victory wasn't just firepower, it was a strategy, a way to fight back with something the humans hadn't prepared for. Vorth's mind raced, and then it hit him. A tactic that had worked for the Centauri in the past, decoy tactics. They had used this strategy before, luring their enemies into traps and ambushes. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could turn the tables on Earth. He turned to his fleet officers. "Prepare for decoy maneuver. I want a full retreat to the asteroid belt. We'll split the fleet into smaller groups, feign a retreat, and wait for their next move. When they follow, we'll strike." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, but they knew that they had little choice. They had to try something. The Centauri fleet began to break apart, scattering into smaller groups that made their way toward the asteroid belt. The Titan ships followed, confident that victory was close at hand. The humans were so sure of their strength that they didn't even suspect the Centauri might be trying to lure them into a trap. As the decoy groups drew closer to the asteroid belt, the Centauri prepared for the ambush. The asteroids would provide perfect cover, and they had equipped a select group of warships with cloaking devices, hoping to catch the humans off guard. If they could destroy enough of the Titan ships, they might still have a chance to win. Vorth watched as his fleet hid behind the massive rocks, his heart pounding in his chest. The Titan ships were close now, too close. His fingers gripped the armrests of his chair, and his mind sharpened as he focused on the strategy. "Now," he whispered. The Centauri forces sprang into action. The cloaked ships emerged from behind the asteroids, firing on the Titan ships. The sudden attack caught the humans off guard, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the Centauri might actually have the upper hand. Their weapons ripped through the hulls of two Titan ships, sending them spiraling into space. But the humans weren't as vulnerable as Vorth had hoped. Even as the Centauri launched their surprise attack, the remaining Titan ships retaliated with devastating precision. The humans' counterattack was swift and overwhelming. The Titan ships' weapons fired like lightning, cutting through the Centauri ships with ease. Even the decoys, which had been designed to fool the humans, were no match for Earth's firepower. Within minutes, the tide turned again. Vorth watched in horror as more of his fleet was destroyed. The Titan ships were just too powerful. They had anticipated every move, countered every attack, and destroyed every decoy with brutal efficiency. It was as though they were always one step ahead. Vorth stood frozen, unable to believe what was happening. The Centauri, the most feared race in the galaxy, were being driven back by humans. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut, this wasn't just a battle, it was a war for survival. The Centauri were no longer invincible. And if they didn't retreat soon, they would be wiped from existence, their empire crushed by the very species they had once written off as weak. As the Centauri fleet continued to struggle against Earth's overwhelming power, Commander Vorth watched helplessly from the bridge of his flagship. The once proud fleet was now a shadow of its former self, with only a few ships left intact. The Titan ships had decimated their forces, and despite every maneuver, every desperate plan they had tried, the humans kept pushing them back. Vorth paced, frustration mounting with every passing second. His mind raced as he considered their next move. He had never faced anything like this before. Even when the Centauri had been outnumbered, they had always found a way to win, until now. But the humans had shattered every expectation. Their strategy was flawless. Their technology was beyond anything the galaxy had seen. And worse of all, they had the will to fight, something the Centauri had never fully accounted for. "Commander, the humans are preparing for another strike," Zarek said, his voice tight with stress. "They're gathering their forces near the Central Command base. They're readying something bigger. We need to fall back now, or we'll be completely wiped out." Vorth clenched his fists. Fall back? How can we fall back when we're facing an enemy that refuses to let us go? The humans aren't giving us an inch. They're not just fighting to survive, they're fighting to show us that they belong in this galaxy, that they deserve to be here. Zarek's expression darkened. Then we need to make them realize that they cannot defeat us. But they are relentless, Commander. I fear we're out of options. Vortha's mind kept racing. Every idea he came up with seemed to collapse under the weight of humanity's fierce resistance. But then, something clicked. The truth that the Centauri had ignored for so long, something that had been staring them in the face from the start, suddenly became clear. The humans had always been underestimated, not because they were weak, but because they had something far more dangerous than any weapon, a unity and resolve like no other species in the galaxy. The Centauri had always relied on their military power to crush their enemies. They had never needed to understand the deeper force that drove others, survival at any cost. The humans, however, were not fighting because they had no choice. They were fighting because they knew they were meant to survive, meant to protect their home and their people. The Centauri had missed that part of the equation. And it was this determination that made humanity so deadly. As Vorth sat back down in his chair, he knew they had reached a critical point. They could no longer rely on brute force alone. If the Centauri were to survive this battle, they needed to understand their enemy on a deeper level, something they had never done before. The humans had outsmarted them at every turn because they had played by a different set of rules. "Zarek," Vorth said slowly, his voice almost a whisper. "We've been looking at this wrong. We've been treating them as if they are just another obstacle to crush. But what if they're more than that? What if the humans have been preparing for us, not just with technology, but with something far more dangerous?" Zarek looked at him, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean, Commander?" Vorth leaned forward, his mind now clear. "The humans aren't just fighting to win this battle. They are fighting for something much bigger. We underestimated their unity, their ability to stand together. It's a force far more powerful than any fleet we can send against them." The realization hit him hard. The humans' greatest strength wasn't their weapons, their technology, or even their military strategy, it was their resolve. No matter how many Centauri they destroyed, the humans would continue to fight. The more the Centauri pushed, the stronger the humans became. Vorth had seen it before, on other worlds, the resilience of a species pushed to the edge of extinction. But he had never expected to see it from the humans. They were not the weaklings the Centauri had believed them to be. They were survivors, and now the Centauri were in their way. "Get me Earth's transmission channels," Vorth ordered, his voice steady once more. "We need to speak to their leaders. It's time we offered them a deal, before we lose everything." Zarek looked uncertain but nodded. "Understood, Commander." As Vorth waited for the transmission, his mind wandered. The humans had always been underestimated, even by their own. But now, they had shown the galaxy their true strength. They weren't just fighting for their survival, they were fighting for their future, for a place among the stars. And the Centauri had to decide whether they would be the ones to stop them, or whether they would fall in the face of humanity's unstoppable will. The transmission came through. Vorth stared at the human leader on the screen, an unflinching, determined face looking back at him. For the first time in his life, Commander Vorth felt something that he had never felt before: respect. "Commander Vorth," the human leader began. "I know why you're here. But I think you should understand something before we continue: Earth will not fall. Not to you, not to anyone. We will fight, and we will survive." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Vorth knew it was true. And deep down, he knew that the Centauri would never be able to break Earth's spirit. The battle had only just begun. The Centauri fleet had been shattered. Commander Vorth could only watch in disbelief as his remaining ships drifted helplessly through space, their once mighty armada reduced to floating debris. The Titan ships, with their devastating firepower, had crippled them beyond repair. But it wasn't just the weapons of the humans that had defeated them, it was something deeper, something that no fleet in the galaxy could ever truly prepare for: the human spirit. The words of the human leader still echoed in Vorth's mind: "Earth will not fall. Not to you, not to anyone." The sheer resolve in those words had cut through the air, stronger than any weapon the Centauri possessed. It wasn't just that the humans fought to survive, they fought for something far more profound. They fought for their home, for their families, for their very existence. They were not just defending a planet, they were protecting everything they had built, everything they had earned. And the Centauri had never understood that kind of power. Vorth stood on the bridge of his flagship, his hands gripping the rail in frustration. "We can't keep running," he muttered to himself. "We can't just leave. Earth will come after us, and the galaxy will see our defeat." Zarek, still loyal to his commander, stepped up beside him. "Sir, we've lost more than just ships. We've lost our reputation. The Centauri have been known as the most powerful force in the galaxy. But now we've shown weakness." Vorth turned to face Zarek, his eyes burning with a mixture of rage and helplessness. "It's not just weakness. It's a total loss. If the humans can defeat us, what does that mean for the rest of the galaxy? How many other species will start to see them as equals? How many will stand beside them?" For the first time, Vorth felt doubt. The Centauri Empire, built on conquest and fear, was now in jeopardy. Their entire existence had been defined by their military might. But Earth's victory had changed everything. They had forced the galaxy to acknowledge that humanity was no longer a minor species to be dismissed, it was a force to be reckoned with. The silence between Vorth and Zarek grew heavy. The Centauri leader knew there was no escaping the truth. Earth had not just won a battle, they had started a new era. Humanity was no longer a footnote in galactic history, they were now a power that would shape the future. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the human leaders were already beginning to understand the full scale of their victory. It wasn't just a win against the Centauri, it was a win for all of humanity. The message had been clear: Earth was no longer a target. It was a force, a voice that could not be ignored. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth's military began to rebuild. The Titan ships were now a symbol of their strength, their ability to stand up to the most powerful forces in the galaxy. But it was more than just the ships that had made the difference, it was the unity of the human people, the determination to survive against all odds. Humanity began to make alliances with other species, ones that had watched the battle unfold from the shadows. The Centauri had been defeated, but their loss wasn't just a military one. It was political, cultural, and psychological. The idea that the Centauri were the galaxy's supreme rulers had been shattered. And in their place, a new reality had emerged, one where Earth stood at the center. The first of many messages came from the Galactic Council. They had watched the battle with increasing concern, and now, they were extending an offer. Earth had shown itself to be a power, not to be conquered, but to be respected. The Council sought to negotiate, to understand how this small, rebellious species had done what no one had thought possible. On Earth, President Lila Thompson addressed the people in a broadcast that was seen across the galaxy. "We have shown that no matter how big the enemy, no matter how insurmountable the odds, we will stand together. Earth has proven its strength. We will no longer cower in the shadow of those who seek to control us. We will take our place among the stars as equals, and we will not be ignored." The speech echoed through space, and for the first time in history, humanity was no longer viewed as the underdog. They were viewed as a force of nature, one that could no longer be overlooked. The Centauri, for their part, were forced to face the consequences of their actions. Their empire, once invincible, had been challenged by a species they thought of as weak. Commander Vorth knew that the days of easy conquest were over. The humans had set the stage for a new era, one where strength was defined not by the power of warships, but by the will to survive, to unite, and to fight for what mattered most. The Centauri would learn this lesson the hard way. And humanity, led by its unwavering resolve, would show the galaxy that Earth was no longer a place of weakness. It was a beacon of strength, one that would burn brightly for eons to come. Vorth stared out into the vast expanse of space, the stars twinkling in the distance. For the first time, he felt something he had never felt before: respect for his enemies. The humans had proven something that no one else had: they had the strength to survive, no matter what the galaxy threw at them. The battle had been lost. But Earth's victory had set in motion a new chapter for the galaxy. And Vorth knew, deep down, that it was a chapter that would forever change the course of history.